Hey everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Title Scoop. So this week we're talking about recitals. This topic came up because I've actually had to come up with a solution really to make some clarification points on a couple of deeds recently, and I thought it might just be a good topic to review. Simply put, a recital is really just a statement of fact, and it's found within a legal document. We often see them in deeds, but you could see them in other legal documents that are recorded, or even not recorded, I suppose, but for our purposes, we're talking about recorded documents. And on their own, they really don't carry a lot of legal weight. However, when they're taken really into context with the bigger picture, they often can give us a lot of information, and they can help us understand what's happening, for instance, in the chain of title. Now, they can be helpful also in explaining marital status. Sometimes consideration, depending on your state, might be really important, whether it's a gift or not. Or even just for some background information, it might be beneficial to have a recital so that people know what's going on or what's happened and why a deed's being given, for instance. Now, as mentioned earlier, they can be found in any type of legal document, but for our purposes, we usually recommend having them in a deed. And the reason for that is a lot of states will say that a deed imparts constructive notice on the purchaser. Not all documents do that. So say a mortgage, for instance, if we put a recital on a mortgage and it's been discharged, that might actually not impart constructive notice because we don't have to look at a discharged or satisfied mortgage after that's actually happened. So again, really state dependent there, but just as an FYI, I usually recommend if you're gonna put a recital, put it in a deed because that's something that will be reviewed in the chain of title for a property. Now, recitals are actually in every single deed. We don't think of them as that. I usually think of a recital as something separate that we're giving additional information. But if you think about it, recitals are actually in every deed. Marital status, for instance, and considerations, things like that. There are a lot of different things that might not be needed, but they give additional information. And can be really helpful in states, say if we have homestead, dower, marital property, community property. Those are states where marital status, for instance, would be really helpful because we need to know whether a spouse needs to join a deed or not if they're selling the property. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's say if we don't have marital status, we may not know if the person's married. We might have to ask some more questions. You still may have to, right? So say a person's single and then they get married after the fact, depending on your state, we might have to get that new spouse's signature. Some states that's the case, some states it's not. Again, you're gonna have to know your state law there. But again, it could also play into a future divorce, right? So depending on the state, separate property might remain separate property. And in some states, once you get married, all that property becomes the marital property and it's part of the divorce. So again, really dependent on your state. Another time that we see recitals is if we have gaps or breaks in the chain of title, and it might actually help us figure out what's going on. So like I said earlier, I use this quite a bit especially when we have like a break in the chain. We might be doing some cleanup and we'll put recitals just to make it a little easier for the next person to understand why we did what we did. But let's do an example of, say we have a deed from 1961 and Janet Pinkney is in title. The next deed out is from Bob Pinkney, Trevor Pinkney, and Jenna Pinkney. And in the recital, it states the sole heirs of Janet Pinkney. Well, by itself, that actually doesn't resolve the problem, right? We still have a break in the chain of title because Janet never deeded out. We don't know what happened with that, but it could lead us in the right direction, right? So we might be able to look at a probate for her or that maybe we don't have yet. Maybe there's an affidavit of heirship out there that we didn't have as part of our search. So again, that recital helped us understand maybe what we need to do in order to fix it. Same with land contracts. If you're a state that you have land contracts, if there's a deed either for the termination or if the land contract has been fulfilled, all terms have been met, I will usually suggest putting a recital just so that people know what's happened. Land contract has been fulfilled, this deed is being given. Or if it's being terminated, the deed's being given because they terminated the land contract. Because it just, again, helps the next person in line know what's going on. As I stated earlier, consideration, depending on your state, might be important. So if you're not sure, definitely give your underwriter a call because I believe in community property states, we do want that consideration, especially if it's a gift. We would need to know if it was, a gift, $0, and how that affects. Now, again, you can use recitals really for anything. You see it most with marital status, change of name consideration. We use it a lot for death and heirship to clarify things. But you'll also, like with a divorce, for instance, I'll suggest if someone is getting a property from a divorce and they're not recording that divorce decree, to make the statement, make a recital on there that the deed is being given because of the divorce proceeding. And that way, again, just gives a little bit of clarity of why they're doing what they're doing. Same with a merger or dissolution. A recital will give a lot of clarity as to what's happening, and that way they can ask the questions later. You'll also see a recital sometimes for easements, restrictions, rights of way, rights of first refusal. those are all things that can be added, and you'll see. If you ever see a recital, you're not sure what to do with it, call your underwriter. Sometimes we can do a requirement to handle it if there's something that needs cleared up, and sometimes we'll just take exception to it. So again, just call your underwriter if you're not sure. All right, that's it for this week. If you guys have questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.